welcome to Bleus Literary Salon, the virtual edition. For those of you who haven't been here before, we have been meeting for, the last 11 Saturdays, I believe, to listen to 5 readers at every event, and it's been a really special time, and it's my favorite part of the week, frankly, and it really gets me through every one of these isolated weeks. So thank you all so much for continuing to coming out and to supporting all of these amazing writers, many of whom have published during not the easiest time to publish. So it's great to continue supporting them. And tonight we have another group of 5 fantastic readers ready to dazzle all of you. We have Amy Poeppel, we have Matthew Binder, we have Noé Alvarez, Celia Bland, and Ilana Masad. So to get us started, I'm going to hand it over to Amy Poeppel.
Paige, this has also been one of my favorite. This Saturday night event is something that I look forward to every week. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry for my connection issues. I'm going to read from my book, Musical Chairs. Musical Chairs is going to be out in just a matter of weeks. It's going to be out in July. I'm going to read a section from the beginning, from the middle of the book so that I can introduce you to Jackie. Jackie is a young New Yorker. She has just gotten off the train from New York City, where she is from, and she is now in the countryside in Connecticut. She's just starting a brand new job working for a conductor who's quite well known. She arrives at his estate, she's greeted by his housekeeper, and before she even gets a chance to see him, he has a bad fall and ends up having to go to the hospital. He's home now, he's recovering, and Jackie is being sent off to have dinner with his 2 middle-aged daughters, and she's feeling a touch out of place. Jackie was in the back seat of a car she'd never been in, with 2 women she didn't know, going to a house she'd never seen with a group of people she'd never met. In what felt like the longest day of her life, she'd been on a subway, a train, a seriously big mansion, and now she was being driven down a deserted country road, past barns and cows and fields to who knows where, and Jackie just wanted to go home. Or at the very least, she wanted to be working, and so far, she hadn't exchanged a single word with her new boss. Did Mr. Stratton even know she'd arrived? No one had bothered to fill her in about what was going on, so when she'd left her 5-star room and gone downstairs for coffee, all she could think of when she caught sight of his crumpled body being tended to by paramedics was every Law and Order episode she'd ever watched. Stupidly, and she really wished she could take it back, she'd asked Marge if he was dead. Even now, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was a murderer on the prowl somewhere in her midst. Estate. The word itself was just absurd. "I'll find someone to carry your bag," Marge had said. What? These people have a bellhop on hand? It was like she'd ended up in an episode of Downton fucking Abbey. And oh my God, Jackie had curtsied when Marge left her in the bedroom. It was some reflex, a stupid little involuntary bend of her knees. She had actually curtsied. She hoped Marge hadn't noticed. She was now in the back seat of a white Range Rover with 2 foil-covered pans that Marge had put in her lap. The Stratton sisters, women twice her age, with whom she had absolutely nothing in common, had insisted she come along for dinner, even though she had been very clear about wanting to stay put. Gwen had said she was going to change out of the ridiculous tennis getup she was in, so Jackie went up to dress for dinner as well. She decided to go up a step in formality, so she changed into a pencil skirt, a blazer, and high heels. And there was Gwen, wearing super cute torn jeans, a white t-shirt, and a little linen jacket. Fuck, thought Jackie. Marge got to stay home with Mr. Stratton. "You go on, dear," she'd said, giving Jackie a push out the door, "and have fun." They got in the car, and for the first few minutes, Bridget was on the phone. When she hung up, she said with a tone that was half overjoyed but half furious, "Well, guess what? Oscar's at the house." "Yay," said Gwen, sounding genuinely happy. "No, not yay," said Bridget. Jackie didn't know who the hell Oscar was, other than another new person to contend with. Apparently, Oscar brought both dogs and a ton of stuff with him, Bridget said, so this can't be good. Jackie did not like dogs. "And the cats are going completely crazy," Bridget went on. Jackie hated cats. You didn't even know he was coming, Gwen asked. No, said Bridget, and he's alone. Something's definitely wrong. Well, I hope they aren't splitting up, Gwen said. But if they are, I have a very good divorce lawyer. Good God, Gwen, Bridget said, that's a leap. Gwen, as if to say, is it, took both of her hands off the steering wheel and put them out, palms up. Jackie gripped the pies in her lap. Did Isabel know he was coming? Jackie had met the daughter, Isabel, briefly when she'd come to the house with Bridget, just as the paramedics were wheeling Mr. Stratton out to the ambulance. Jackie didn't want to like her, but she sort of did, and she was glad she'd be at the dinner, so at least there would be someone her own age to talk to. No, I don't think she knew, Bridget was saying, or if she did, she didn't tell me. Holy shit, Gwen said. You've got both your grown-up kids living back at home, and we've got a surprise wedding to deal with at the end of the summer. Whose wedding, Jackie wondered, because if it was Isabel, that bitch seriously had everything. Jackie could just imagine the kind of Brooks Brothers wearing, polo playing, money-making frat boy she'd be marrying. This isn't funny, Bridget said, but she started laughing too. Oh, what is happening? My kids are supposed to be off living their lives, and I'm supposed to be living my life and having sex all summer. Jackie was pretty sure they'd forgotten she was there. Gwen sighed. God, I feel like I aged today. Seeing Dad there on the floor like that, so old in his hospital gown, and then boom, that was some news. I guess it's time to go dress shopping. What her bosses falling on the ground and buying dresses had in common was a mystery. Unless Gwen was predicting a need for funeral attire, was her entire job coming to an end? Maybe Mr. Stratton was too old to finish what he started. When her own grandfather fell down in the bathroom a few years earlier, he had one problem, immobility after another, bed sores after another, pneumonia, until he died. That was it. Lottie, said Bridget. And what would Johannes think about this? And what is Hans going to say? Apparently, the cast of characters from a World War II movie was part of this story. Hans, oh my God, I remember Hans, Gwen said. He was awful. I think I'm having an anxiety attack, said Bridget. Do you have a Xanax? Ugh, thought Jackie. Rich people are just the worst. Breathe, said Gwen, rolling down the window and taking a left so hard that Jackie's shoulder knocked into the door of the car. Gwen went up the bumpy long driveway, and Jackie had to hold on tight to the desserts just to keep them from falling off of her lap. She looked out the window and saw the house. It was pretty, but not nearly as elegant as Mr. Stratton's. Less intimidating, less like some sort of grand hotel. And holy shit, there were real live barnyard animals out in the yard. God, these people were weird. They hadn't even gotten out of the car when not one, but two totally hot guys came out of the house. Wait, make that three, although the third was handsome in an older, Clooney kind of way. It was like she'd stumbled onto the set of an Abercrombie commercial. They were all, every last one of them, wearing jeans and t-shirts, and Jackie had never felt such regret for her choice of clothing in her life. She could not possibly have gotten it more wrong. The older hot guy opened the door for her as she got out, and he offered his hand as though she were stepping out of a carriage. What's with the sheep? Bridget was asking, but she got distracted before anyone could answer and started hugging one of the two cute guys. What are you doing here? She shrieked at him, sounding excited and happy, but also kind of like he was yet another uninvited farm animal hanging out on her property. The guy didn't, Jackie noticed, answer the question. Isabel introduced Jackie to him, saying that he was her twin, and then to Kevin, not saying who he was, and then they all walked inside the house together, making their way into a big kitchen. There was a cat on the counter, right where the food was being prepared, and no one seemed at all grossed out or even bothered by it. Bridget turned on the sink faucet, and the cat started drinking out of it, its tongue actually touching the place where the water came out. No fucking way would Jackie drink tap water tonight. Without even asking her what she wanted, Gwen stuck a big glass of pink wine in Jackie's hand and took her out to the porch and left her there alone, saying, "Make yourself comfortable, I'll be back in a jiffy." Jackie looked around the porch and saw a tray full of cheese on a low table, but she was too uncomfortable to help herself. Instead, she pulled her phone out to check her email. When she'd taken the job, she thought that this was going to be challenging, an interesting position, assisting one of the world's most influential musicians. But as soon as she started, she found out that most of the work was easy stuff pretty much anyone could do. But a job was a job. Unfortunately, this one meant spending much of the summer, and in fact all of August, up here in the middle of nowhere, in a place that didn't even have a public transit system. She felt something massive brush up against her ass and jumped back as an enormous shaggy black dog, drooling and clumsy, glumped up to her. He stuck his head in her crotch, leaving slime all over her skirt, and then promptly began eating all the cheese off the platter. Oscar ran out then and pulled the dog away, putting the platter up onto the table that was nicely set for dinner. Jackie did a quick count and saw that there were only 6 place settings. She knew instantly that of the 7 in attendance, she was the one who was not supposed to be there. That's all. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Paige.
Thank you so much, Amy. Something that's really cool about Amy and Les Bleus is that was your 3rd time reading, I think, right?
That's correct. 3
And
times.
this is your first time reading from this novel. Is that right, Elsa? Is that what you said?
First time reading from Small Admissions, first time reading virtually. I love your in-person events, so I'm looking forward to those.
Yeah, well, it'll happen again, but for now, these are,
They're great.
They're helping us survive.
I love them.
So I have just pasted the link to pre-order Amy's book, which comes out on, Amy, what day exactly?
July 21st.
July 21st. And if you pre-order using this link, you can get a signed copy. Yeah. Correct?
That's correct. Yes. And it's awesome. A wonderful little bookstore in Litchfield County, and they would love support. So
fantastic. Yeah, great. Because not only is it super important to support all of these writers, but also independent bookstores.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Paige. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. And so now I'm going to hand it over to our second reader, Matthew Binder. Hi, Matt.
Hi. How's it going?
Good.
Good. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone for attending this evening. I'm going to be reading from my novel, The Absolved, came out last year. The impetus behind writing this book was a conversation I had with my brother a few years ago about AI and automation displacing people from the workforce. And my brother, who's a physician, he could be a little sanctimonious about things, and he said something along the lines of, in the future, people will just have to work a little bit harder to make themselves indispensable in the economy the way that I have. And I said, brother, in 20 years, AI is going to be making much better medical decisions than you. And so my book takes place 20 years from when I had that conversation in 2000. So it takes place in 2036, and it's about a wealthy physician who thinks he's made himself indispensable in the economy, who, well, you'll have to read the book to see what happens. But I'm just going to read the first couple pages of the novel. I've just suffered an accident while driving to meet Taylor, an entirely lovely woman who's not my wife. It's nothing serious, the accident that is, just a crumpled fender and a sore elbow from the impact. More of a nuisance than anything else. I am, after all, a busy man on a tight schedule. There must be 24 passerby who've stopped to stare. You'd think I just had a 6-car pileup from the spectacle I am. Go on, I tell them, nothing to see here, everything's fine. These days, ever since self-driving cars became the law, this sort of thing is rare. I almost can't remember the last time I got stuck in traffic due to a wreck, and fatalities are way down, 90% in 6 years, if I remember reading the statistic correctly. No more good timing drunks on the road, at least not behind the wheel. Just like that, a scourge of suburban American society was eradicated forever. A lot of good it does me, though. Where were these marvels of human innovation when I needed them most? It's regrettable to admit, but before I had a bit of money in my pocket, I had something of a reputation for irresponsible driving. Even so, our technology is far from perfect. My car just hopped the curb and hit a streetlight. I trace a square before me, opening my hologram. Insurance company, I say, and Celia appears, her face a composite of 2 of my favorite actresses. But no sooner have we exchanged some pleasantries than she assaults me with questions. She's skeptical of my explanation for the accident. It seems she suspects I'm at fault. The insinuation is that I've tampered with the vehicle. That's a very popular thing to do these days, especially with the kids. They watch the old films in which cars meant freedom, rebellion, and sex, and they want that for themselves. People are bored of being chauffeured around, so they attempt their own retrofits to take back some control. Kaylee has repeatedly informed me that making such a modification is a felony, punishable by fine or jail time. She puts me on hold, and I turn on some music to pass the time. Chloe, my car's operating system, is also upset. I refuse to listen to the playlist she's made. She insists she knows my taste better than I know them myself, which, I assure her, can't possibly be true. Besides, at 47 years of age, I don't do playlists. 1,000 times I've told Chloe I like albums, but without fail, she tries to persuade me that they're an antiquated mode of consumption. They lack the consistency of quality and flow she maintains that only a machine can deliver. On most occasions, after much opposition and reluctance, Chloe will generally acquiesce and play any of the 24 garage rock bands from my youth that I still listen to with great piety. But today, she's forcing Rachel's music on me. Rachel has wholeheartedly embraced the technology-driven cultural shifts of the past 20 years with nary a gripe. It bothers her not one bit that it's been years and years since a tune penned by an actual human being has made any kind of splash. The machines are superior to man in almost every way imaginable, she once said. Why else would we have turned over all of life's most important functions to them? A song written and recorded by an algorithm named Navia comes blasting from the speakers. I immediately recognize the chorus, comprised of this sequence of notes: A, C sharp, E flat. What's come to be known as the melody monetizer, because in 2032, a research project led by a team of AI determined that this particular arrangement is the most pleasing to the human ear and thusly the most profitable. A recently released study shows that 92% of contemporary pop songs and commercial jingles now use it. Can't you find me any talking heads, I say? I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm sorry, Henry, Chloe says, but the talking heads are on my no playlist. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Rachel gave me a list of bands I'm no longer allowed to play for you. In my own car? Rachel doesn't like guitar music, Henry. But she's not here now. It's out of my hands, Henry. Kaylee returns to the line. She's completed her remote assessment of the vehicle. The miracles these modern day machines can perform is beyond me. It seems each new day gives us fresh ways in which they can enter what was once private. Thinking about this sends me to despair. I engage the breathing practice my yoga mentor has taught me and repeat my mantra. There's the nothing that is there and the nothing that is not there, until Kaylee informs me that I'm not guilty. The culprit, my software had failed to update. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
When did that book come out again? Can you remind us?
December of, so it's a year and a half now, December of 2018. Yeah.
I have read that book twice, just to let everyone know. And now I'm sharing the link here in the chat. So please buy Matt's book. Thank you, Matthew Binder.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Celia Bland.
Thank you so much. And Paige, I just want to thank you so much for doing this, during the quarantine. It's been such a comfort, and an inspiration to watch and listen to the readers. So thank you so much for all these efforts and for having me. I'm going to read from Cherokee Roadkill, which is my last collection, and then some poems that I've written in the last few months or revised in the last few months. This collection was inspired as a kind of memorial to a woman I knew growing up who was quite influential on my life, though I didn't know her all that well. She worked in the local bookstore, and which was a Christian bookstore, and she kind of ferried books that she thought would make an impression on me when I would go in there. A very kind woman. She was murdered by her boyfriend when I went off to college, and I wrote these poems about what I imagined about her life, what I imagined about her boyfriend's life, and about her murder. So I'm just going to read a few from there. The ones I'm reading tonight are from his perspective. They're set in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina, which is where I'm from, and in the little towns around the Cherokee Reservation there. This is called Cherokee, 1974. That was the year of throwing pebbles at passing cars, of acid puddles at the A&P, a rat peeking from the cardboard stack, flattened butts and rotting produce. On the front, some reservation brave feathered for the tourists, Alki, Cherokee, $5, a snapshot. Next block, a black bear in a wire box, $5. The bear wavered like a bad signal, thick spit frothing its near toothless gums of black sateen. Lurching on mangy feet like his pups, drunk and blinded, he wanted a stone, that bear bright, that wet. He would scratch his name and brain the drugstore brave, the dancing bear. Either, neither, both. Cherokee Hogscape. Pops would say, hogs will knock you down and chaw your eyeballs out of the socket. I seen them. Pops collected slops from the poolroom cafe, making you carry plastic buckets. Don't slop your sneakers. With hamburger scraps, dollops of cream corn, loaf heels, or cabbage cores, boy. Tip them into that trough as the hogs shoulder like nimble churchgoers to a pew, jaws scooping pulp, tensile snouts like chestnut halves, snuffling. When gravy slops your sneaks, Pops hollers, peel me a switch, and flexes his ochre arm. You can read switches. Calibrate heft to pain, welts, testifying tensile swish to bloodied shins or merely blistered. You like to choose wood that bled, flexing your own red arm to snap a limb from some mud-spattered, debarked aspen in the hog pen, a bottom barren of grass, leaf, or bush. Hogpack flanked you, 350 pounds of rippling sides, bristling eyes. You heard him snuffling at night through the raw plywood walls of the room off the horse barn, where you and Pops, under a chenille counterpane in the chill of 4 a.m., heard pigeons flutter above your plywood ceiling, cooing. In prison, it struck you. It wasn't Pop's hogs you hated, but his chickens. Those scores scratching sawdust with spurred claws, sequins pinned for eyes. Not like lash-lined and irised hog eyes watching as you shit between roots of oak, then waded into the creek to sluice off chicken creosote. Prison mess is the scratch and caw of Pop's roosters at the feeders. And here you are, slopping potato goop into troughs again. They say a cock crowed when Peter denied our Savior, a cockcomb like chawed meat, a skull full of beans. But even Jesus knew, chicken's got a doodle-doo. Lost Highway. When his Pops made him scrape that chicken smush from the barn's sawdust, he caught a glimpse of a blood bead on the bird's flattened beak, beautiful red as the opening he'd cut. Her mouth open to a strangling language, slipping like steam into her silence. The throat bone bleached as the plastic rings binding a six-pack of beer, making him thirsty. He felt the uplift of flight. Bird bone, where could he go? And it was blood answered him. And then just a few from a longer poem in here that's actually about her death, Louisa's death. Trail of Tears. Dying, she heard the hiss of radiator, her hand a leaf on the floor where he dropped it, leaves scattering in the wind of lungs, slit and leaking, her mind a nest of twigs. Dying, the sassafras of breath, yellowing root of tongue. Trail of tears, Nantahala of interludes, these miles from kitchen to bed, this trail ending in the snow and cold hearts, hear them slow. Tin cans in a ditch by the road, thinning to brittle bitterness. And just a few new ones. these are poems that have been inspired by just, you know, the plethora and variety of shootings that have been going on, and by animals. Many of the poems there's poems about sharks, bats, horses, whales. This one is called The Knot Knot and has a line by C.D. Wright, and I'll tell you what line that was afterwards. The Knot Knot. I move from inversion into a wider world, me who lacks charity, who sees the material selvage and stamps paid in the margin of every sheet, as if dying were an account for absence. Internal ticks, tick, as heat clicks this slur of flush in my flesh, as if I were cartoon ham bone tenderized with heat, and heat were pink panting mouth. Let me. A seed pod bursting, a miniature basketball deflating its cracked smile, tardy release of heats, tessellations, a spirit puffed into the air above the damp grass, rising, falling, hovering. Never again will I feed from my nipples a soul. And rising, falling, hovering is the C.D. Wright line. This poem is called Shoot Shoot. When I shot the target, there was a whisper as bullet entered pulp, forming within that flat dimension a convex tip, a nipple, handy as coat hook or siphon. If you want to stop the conversation, if you want to fast forward to the erection, antenna beaming scratch to ease your itch, then read this horse opera, written for the adolescent girl in the reign of RPM, horse as language of feeling. Out of loneliness between the knees, heels out, thighs clenched back, erect, our gait will be conversation, canter, trot, gallop, horse as customer service, human sweat and heart bursting at Marathon and Churchill Downs, the opposite of arrest. Heart bursting on impact, coneflower or snowball inverting like gay men in the 40s, hollyhocks, bullets, never feed another soul with body. And this one is quite recent. Red fox, you were molting that August 4th. They pulled from my mother's swimmers wriggling into a dog day me. Red fox, why do you cross my path again? You look fleetingly over shoulder and flick a brush thick frivolity of tail, pale as my own pelt. We hover together in trot, you in front. In Carolina, we might bury a sourdough mold enfolding generational flecks of hands that kneaded. We might convene and call it rib. We might lay vixen in red clay. The earth does not imprison, but submerge. Ribs rise like icons wedded by animals. I brush from small ideas, the earth. And then just one last one. Sorry, I had marked it and I realized I go. Called Bone Brooch. It has a little epigraph from Anne Lauterbach. One can see better from the periphery than from the center. There is the palm family, the wild pigs, the dodo. New beings seem to spring from these two categories, people and animals, indigenous or aboriginal, faceless and numberless. In the Galapagos, Darwin observed the innumerable smaller orifices of the desert wastes. Are these holes a battlefield's moon landscapes? Are these holes Kafka's shelves of the mind, excavated to store new ideas? Where is a hole for the wing I found on an even stretch of Vilnius sidewalk? Lone wing, new being, bloody corolla at the snapped bone, fresh milk blue hole of bone, transparent as spit. Bone brooch set in a crown of feathers, who made you? Darwin wrote, although diligently I tried to collect as many plants as possible, I succeeded in getting very few, and such wretched looking little weeds. We fancied even that the bushes smelt unpleasantly. We are, after all, leaving skin on every armrest, on every tray table, with every scratch. When I first visited Kyrgyzstan, women bustled, hillock bellies, hump breasts, chins cooing, hair an outrageous cardinal brittle. Latvian and German and Russian men were trees where they nested. Now women have small rib cages and the darting heads of pigeons. How can timber and hen mate and produce exact sexual types? On Aeroflot, the recorded announcements resonate and basso profundo Russian. A bird twitters in English, fasten, careful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celia. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of those beautiful poems. Oh, look, somebody just wrote beautiful in all caps in the chat. Those beautiful poems with us. And you read in such a rhythmic and soothing tone. I feel like I could just sit and listen to you read to me forever, honestly. I felt almost hypnotized by it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to share the link to Cherokee Roadkill right here in the chat. Thank you again, Celia.
Thank you
so much.
Very much.
And now I'm going to invite Noé Alvarez. Are you there, Noé?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I will be reading from my memoir, Spirit Run, a 6,000-mile marathon through North America's stolen land. You can find it at Catapult. It came out in March. It is a working class narrative about indigenous, working class, First Nation, Mexican people who run from Alaska to Panama. You know, it's about the capacity of ordinary people surviving. It's about running as an act of resistance, and that, you know, running becomes a healing act when you dedicate it to someone greater than yourself. So I'll be reading from my prologue. So if that doesn't hook you, all right. So it goes as follows. 2003, among the pines of Bella Coola in Canada's British Columbia, Canadian authorities escort a 17-year-old mother in handcuffs to identify and unearth the site where she buried a baby son a few days earlier. The teenage mother's name, Crow, of the Secwepemc Nation, whose full name translates to water waves, is reflected in her tears. The baby she buried was her firstborn son, pronounced dead at the 7 weeks old. For 49 days, her baby lived with the power of a name, under the protection of Secwepemc tradition of caring for one's own, blanketed with the dreams of a mother who sang to him until the very end, when he stopped eating. Fearing that the hospital would take him away, Crow wrapped him in his cradle board and escaped with him into the forest. She remembers that night in the mountains as very cold. The rain pelleted her as she and 2 others encircled the boy in a wall of ceremony before digging up a spot in the muddy earth with a shovel. The Secwepemc people bury their own. But on this February day, the authorities unearthed the body of the infant Nupika Amak, one who can travel between 2 worlds, reversing the sacred order by which a Secwepemc mother makes peace with the loss of a son. They desecrate the earth in front of her, land that had laid claim to Nubika Amak's spirit, and bring him back to this world to be processed, tagged, and issued both a birth and death certificate. Then they take his mother back into custody for questioning. When asked why she didn't register her baby, because she wanted him to be a freedom baby, free from government oppression. In 2004, in a salmon fish hatchery in Shikloon Village, Alaska, where snow is thickly packed onto the ground and the air cuts a person's face like obsidian glass, 30-year-old Chula Pepper, a traveler from San Diego, California, stares into a mirror of a bathroom with a Swiss Army knife in hand. No job, no relationship, no home. She grabs her long hair and cuts, like sickle to wheat, long black strands before settling onto the cold floor, nearly bald. She shivers over the few things to her name: a backpack, some clothing, a sleeping bag, rain pants, and a troubled past. Tomorrow, she decides, life will be different. In the small town of Smithers, Canada, 19-year-old Zanya Lone Wolf for the Gitsan and Dakel nations quits her job flipping burgers at a McDonald's and relinquishes her role as a caretaker of a household in torment: an incarcerated father, a drug-addicted mother, and a murdered cousin along Canada's highway of tears. Against her mother's wishes, she withdraws what little savings she has from an ATM, purchases a backpack, and breaks from all she has ever known to join a caravan of indigenous runners. Still farther north, in one of the coldest parts of the Vaishraku, or Arctic village, Alaska, an elder named Ipana packs her life of 60 years into 5 oversized suitcases and travels to join the others, indigenous runners from across the world congregating in Alaska for a race through North America toward Panama. In Fairbanks, Ipana, a leader in the Dene territories, a community aligned with the migration patterns of the porcupine caribou, faces the wind and thinks about these ancient runners who had passed through these lands, migratory protectors of the sun who had moved with the herds of the caribou. The time has come for Ipana to find within herself the spirit of those runners, the sun people, to find the courage to leave home and spread an urgent message: the Arctic is dying. Around the same time, in Oakland, California, 29-year-old Cheeto awakes to the day on which his dream will come true. A dream of a run that unifies all the people of the world and that takes him far away from an area he no longer feels a part of, the Bay Area, to which he was brought over from Mexico when he was only 2 years old. He has quit his job at EB Games, said goodbye to his nieces and nephews, and scavenged the Bay Area's thrift stores for warm clothing. He packs his backpack, takes farewell photos with family, then washes down a couple of Heinekens at a going-away party this afternoon. The next morning, he boards a gray van, which will take him to Alaska. Alone in the Hazlitt Basin, in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains in Fresno, California, a man dials into his Apache and Purepecha heritage, beating a drum for guidance. Here, beside a fire pit among ponderosa pines, in ceremonial sweat, Andrek prepares himself spiritually and mentally to co-lead runners through North America. He meditates for the courage and the clarity to lead indigenous warriors safely across vast lands. He sings and stokes the fire, calling on the wisdom of his Apache mother and Vietnam veteran elders who taught him about committing to things that are bigger and greater than oneself. He channels the wisdom of the medicine bag around his neck, Apache protection, he calls it, and drives a gray van all the way down to Los Angeles to pick up runners before driving far north to Alaska in search of that person that his father wasn't. In Arizona, there's a man whose soul is branded by the tragedy of the copper mine strike of 1983. He, Pacquiao, the main leader of the run, was about 10 years old when he witnessed his hometown of Ajo, Arizona on lockdown, martial law enforced, the town besieged by bulldozers, snipers, police, and the National Guard. It was an event that displaced many residents, separated families, and converted the place into a near ghost town. For 4 days and 4 nights, Pacquiao, of Yaqui, Tohono O'odham, and Opata heritage, submerges himself in ceremony in an arid region of southern Arizona. He sweats, fasts, and prepares himself to carry forward the immense weight laid upon him 2 years prior by the elder Gustavo, his mentor, a prominent labor movement leader, and the founder of the sacred ultramarathons across North and South America, held every 4 years, known as Peace and Dignity Journeys. Pacquiao co-organizes with Andrek and Chula Pepper a safe ride across North America, starting in Alaska. After securing and loading up the vans, Pacquiao leads a caravan north to Chickaluna, Alaska. On the way, he gives lectures and picks up runners. In Sonora, Mexico, two Yoreme nation brothers, Masad, also called El que corriendo mata, or he who runs conquers, and his older brother Greñas, take leave of their families and university studies to hitchhike several days north to the US border. They journey to fulfill an obligation to their elders, to surrender to the run and embrace the way of the warrior, those committed to the protection and preservation of land, animals, and their people's culture. These are only some of the marathoners of Peace and Dignity journeys in 2004. They are ordinary people, proud of their heritage, summoned by a call greater than themselves. And then there's me. So that's my contribution. Thank you all. I hope it brings much medicine to a lot of people out in the world.
Thank you so much, Noé. Oh, sorry, am I muted still? No, I'm here, right? What a beautiful way to combine all of these stories and weave them together and to leave us on that last point before we can discover how you fit into that. And so I can't wait to find that out. I actually bought your book about a week ago, I think. So on that note, I'm going to share the link so that everybody else can do the same. There we go. Thank you so much, Noé.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to hand it over now to, thank you. I'm going to pass it over now to Ilana Masad.
Thank you so much. Hi. Thank you, Amy and Matthew and Celia and Noé for just sharing all of your wonderful words and this space with all of us. And thank you, Paige, for holding this event and for bringing us all together. It's really lovely to sort of, you know, in a time of social distancing, to share this kind of space with people, even if we're all far away. So I'm going to be reading from my new novel that came out, well, my first novel, not new novel, that came out last week. It's called All My Mother's Lovers. And for a little bit of context for this section, the novel is about a queer woman named Maggie who comes home after her mother has died. And the names in this portion that are sort of relevant are, so Maggie is our main character, Ariel is her brother, and Lucia is her girlfriend. Well, her sort of girlfriend. They've been dating. This is the first time Maggie's sort of been with someone in a serious way. And so she's still kind of nervous about this relationship. It takes Maggie a good long hour to drag herself out of the house. She showers and gets dressed and knocks on Ariel's door to try to get him to come with her, but he tells her to go away. And Leona emerges for a moment with her t-shirt on the wrong way and the tag sticking out the front, and apologizes for Ariel, tells Maggie that he is just heartsick and needs to rest. Leona is Ariel's kinda sorta girlfriend. Maggie wants to puke. She starts writing a text to Lucia. While I'm trying to deal with things, my bro is getting a pity fuck from this chick who's probably only into him because he's all tragic. But then she glances up to Lucia's latest text from last night. Thinking of you, babe. Hope tomorrow isn't too rough. And deletes the message she was drafting. Decides that Lucia's implication in saying she hoped tomorrow, meaning today, wouldn't be too rough, is that she probably doesn't want ongoing updates. Stop being so clingy, Maggie tells herself. The hospital, at least, turns out to be much easier a process than she expected, though she has to wait for what feels like forever. There are several people ahead of her, a string of mourners all trying to identify their loved ones. None of them are alone. There are two men speaking Spanish softly to each other, maybe brothers, an older woman sitting, rocking herself as they hover over her. One of the men is gay, Maggie's pretty sure, his washed out skinny jeans clinging to his muscled thighs, his t-shirt pink and tight, one of his arms sleeved in dragon tattoos. When she meets his eyes, he jerks a nod at her, a moment of recognition. Farther down the room, full of plastic chairs, a hetero couple watches the muted TV, their hands clasped tightly on top of their adjoining armrests. Next to Maggie sits an old white man with wisps of fluffy hair above his ears and a younger man with a hooked nose and an abundance of dirty blonde hair. The only voices are the receptionists and the brother's softly curling words. She checks Instagram while she waits and finds Ariel posted the same thing there as he did on Facebook, the requisite photo of nothing, just a blur with corners that might be his desk or the kitchen island. She goes back to Facebook to see his post has acquired more comments, love, expressions of solidarity. Her own feed is mostly shared articles about queer injustice, climate change, the threats to healthcare, events she's checked into. Most recently, the informational meeting in July for folks interested in serving on committees at the new Pride Center that opened in January. There's also an embarrassing amount of pictures and videos of pit bulls, her favorite breed of dog, which is, she believes, deeply misunderstood. It's not an inaccurate reflection of herself, her life, but it's incomplete, almost impersonal. She and Lucia aren't Facebook official, for instance. They haven't even posted a photo of themselves together. She begins to type something up, an announcement of her own, when her name is called. It's quick, the medical examiner showing her a picture of her mother's face, which is bruised and looks nothing like her. They also show her a picture of her mother's collarbone with its splotchy birthmark, which Iris always said looked like a koala bear clinging to a tree, but which to Maggie just looked blobby. Still, it's hers all right. There's one more thing. The ME, a wide-faced man with a gold cross hanging around his neck, says. Her clothes are in pretty bad shape, but if you want... No, Maggie says quickly, the idea of handling her mom's blood-soaked garments making her lightheaded. No, thanks. Whoa there. The ME's hands are gripping her arms, though Maggie isn't sure how they got there or why she's against the wall when a moment ago she was standing 3 feet away from it. You okay? She must have almost fainted. She's never fainted, ever, in her life. Yes, she says, her shoulders tensing, and he releases her. There was also this, he says, and reaches into the file and folder-filled cart next to him. He hands her a manila envelope, its flap folded back, unsealed. Maggie reaches in and finds her mother's necklace, the silver chain and the raw amber pendant. The one she always wore when she headed on the road, a good luck charm. Not a very good one, as it turns out. Thank you, she says. She signs the paperwork and asks about getting a copy of the death certificate to Mrs. Gershon and whether she needs to do anything else to make sure the body gets to the funeral okay. She tries to forget about the clothes, to banish from her mind the image of her mother's dead face, nose broken and bruised, eyes closed, mouth set low like the disapproving frown Iris wore whenever Maggie spoke about girls. Maggie desperately wants to get high. She wants to stop feeling so much one moment and nothing the next. It is uncomfortable, the welling up of emotion that keeps plaguing her, the intrusive internal mantra that her mother is dead, 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 dead before her time, dead before she should be, dead so suddenly, so stupidly. She hasn't eaten yet, so she drives to an In-N-Out, the place she and Iris used to go to celebrate things together when they were on good terms. Iris took Maggie there when she got her period, when she graduated high school, after her first year of college, when she got a promotion at the insurance agency. They'd usually get something from the secret menu, which Iris thought was so cool, as if it were a speakeasy and she was a naughty flapper indulging in the forbidden. Iris would always get the vanilla milkshake, Maggie the chocolate one. But she gets the vanilla today, and eats and drinks in the parking lot, sitting in the car, sucking the milkshake down until she gets a brain freeze and slams her fist to her head to make it go away. Once it does, she wishes it were back. The physical ache seems easier. She calls Lucia. I'm sorry, she says, for, being needy. I'm just all over the place. It's not needy, babe, Lucia says. Your mom died. You're allowed to reach out. There's loud noise in the background, but she's moving away from it. Is someone, forging a sword over there or something? Maggie asks. Yes, actually. Well, sort of. Sue Min's trying to replicate a spearhead for this project she's working on. It's interesting, actually. But anyway, babe, how are you? Part of her is convinced that no matter how nice Lucia is being, she's going to leave, because who wants to deal with a new girlfriend whose mother has just died? But for now, Lucia is on the phone and talking to her. How do people do this? She asks. She hears Lucia heave a sigh. I don't know. We just do. We push through it. We? My aunt died last year. My grandfather's on both sides the year before. Oh, Maggie says, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She can almost hear Lucia shrugging through the phone. You didn't ask, babe, Lucia says, and Maggie wonders whether she was supposed to. You don't usually like talking about pain, Lucia adds softly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilana, for sharing that with us. Oh my gosh, I've been super excited about this book for a really long time, so I'm so happy that we now all get to read it. Can you hold it up for us just so people can see? Amazing. Thank you, Ilana. I'm going to post the link to Ilana's book there. Thank you again so much for reading, Ilana. And so that concludes another week of Les Bleus Literary Salon virtual edition. Thank you for starters to Amy, Matthew, Celia, Noé, and Ilana for reading. A huge thank you to all of you for calling in again and for taking part in this. I really appreciate it. I just want to read you guys a little something that I wrote just before this. I don't normally read off a page. I'm much more just off the top of my head, but it's now 2 o'clock in the morning in Nairobi, and so I wanted to make sure that I could sound at least slightly coherent at this time of day. So the weekend after Memorial Day has always hosted the annual celebration of Les Bleus Literary Salon, and it's been a chance to gather on a rooftop and celebrate this reading series before moving into the summer months. And this weekend marks Les Bleus' 6th anniversary. And I mention this not to celebrate Les Bleus, so to speak, but instead to acknowledge and thank all of you who've continued to show up month after month over the years and now week after week. And especially during a time where the world has become scarier and scarier and scarier, frankly. And I remember so vividly the salon that we held a week after the election in 2016, and looking out on actually quite a few of you who are in this call right now, all of your faces, and seeing the shock and the fear and the confusion on everyone's face. I also remember standing in front of you exactly a year ago at the 5th anniversary, shortly following the abortion ban in Alabama. And much like I said on both of those occasions, I believe that when we face this kind of darkness in the world, it's so important to continue showing up for each other and to continue supporting artists and to try and put a little light out into the world where we can gather and feel part of a community. So that being said, Les Bleus will continue to be a safe place for writers to share and for our listening community to support you, as it always has been and will be for the rest of Les Bleus' existence. But Les Bleus is a lot more than that, because Les Bleus is me, and I have never been one to just sit quietly. And so I want to just share that I'm completely horrified by the events of the last week in the United States. I lived in the US for 11 years up until this past November. I plan on returning to live in the US. I've spent countless hours since the 2016 election trying to learn about and process the privilege that I was born with as a white Canadian. And I will not stop pursuing what exactly that means. I truly consider it my duty to speak up against those in power who violently attack certain racial groups through social media. I also think it's my duty to stand up for those who've been killed for no reason other than the color of their skin. It's also my duty to stand up for women who do not have ownership of their own bodies for no reason whatsoever. And I beg all of you on this call, especially the white members of this Les Bleus community, to spend time assessing your positions and to find out how you can turn that privilege that you were born into to something that creates change and to something that saves a life. And I've tried to find a few places that need donations and look to those in the community who understand more than I the kinds of places where we can donate to, you know, make a tiny difference tonight, tomorrow morning, whenever it is, because sometimes that's the quickest and most effective first step. So if you'd like to donate, I'm going to share a Twitter post where you can access some pretty great links that have been put together by somebody much smarter than I, where you can access a number of organizations who are helping to post bail for those who need during this time of protest. And so again, I want to thank all of you for joining tonight. To Amy, Matthew, Celia, Noé, and Ilana for reading. We're going to keep doing this every Saturday night, so please come, continue supporting writers, artists in this community, independent bookstores, and look in the mirror and figure out what you can do to make the world a better place. And so, all that being said, good night from Nairobi, and I hope to see you guys all online again.
Thanks, Paige.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, Paige.